For Sunday, July 17th, you found the Georgia Gang topping our agenda today. Protests all over Metro Atlanta. Were they handled properly? The King Bible will stay with Martin Luther King Jr.'s estate, and terror hits the rest of Western Europe. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning. We're glad you could be with us. It's been a tumultuous week since last we taped. The nation barely recovering from the shootings in Dallas and other shootings around the country. And then as we tape this broadcast, the nation reeling and feeling total sympathy for Europe, where a terrorist truck killed almost 100 people in Nice along the Côte d'Azur. And but we're not going to talk about that because that'll all be coming up on the Sunday broadcast. We will acknowledge that Mike Pence is likely, almost surely, to be Donald Trump's running mate. We'll talk about that a little later. But I want to start closer to home because I didn't get a chance to get my thoughts in last week, if you will. The pointless marches in downtown Atlanta that went on for several nights, I guess 5 or 6 nights in a row. Phil and I have talked and we disagree. I want to see what you guys think. I thought that Mayor Kasim Reed and Police Chief George Turner handled things quite well at the beginning and then may have let this thing go on too long. What's the point? And why are these young people, mostly young people, protesting after 5 Dallas police officers were murdered in a hate crime? It doesn't work for most people.
Well, maybe it doesn't work for most certain kind of people, but it most certainly works for people who have been the victims of police brutality and for hundreds of years, okay? But I do think the mayor handled it well. I think he, you cannot control people. And I also think that the Black Lives Matter movement is a evolution of the civil rights movement with nonviolent protests in the street. But its object is to disrupt. And that is the part that I sort of have difficulty getting my arms around. They want to disrupt to cause attention to the cause. And that's the purpose.
But they want to disrupt and they want to go onto the expressway.
That's
now,
part
I'm
of the
going to draw
disruption.
a terrible, ugly analogy here. Phil, if you put those protesters out on the downtown connector, I-75 and 85, and 18-wheelers are coming down, you've got Nice, France.
Well, it is a public safety issue, you're right. And I understand, Alexis, what you're saying. I have no problem. I don't think any American has a problem with a legitimate, peaceful demonstration. But I would take it beyond the connector. I mean, you had successive nights where people were just swarming the streets, taking selfies, and saying the vilest things to the police who were restrained. Now, you could say, yes, that's commendable restraint, but I have a problem when Mayor Kasim Reed says, well, I don't want to give arrest records to a lot of these young people. Well, wait a minute, let's follow the law here. Again, they can demonstrate peacefully in various areas, but when you can't have emergency vehicles go through and when you have total disrespect, I will say I appreciate the mayor for saying let's try to respect law enforcement.
Hey, Jeff.
But we need to crack down more.
Well, I'm more with Phil, but Jeff, let me ask you this. One night this week, the protesters went to the governor's mansion.
They did.
He wasn't there, he was in Europe.
Yeah.
And they kind of blocked West Paces there and made Buckhead traffic a mess. And they demanded to meet with the mayor and the police chief. And it was about, it was after 11 o'clock, as I recall.
Midnight.
I was looking at the Fox 5 extended coverage. And I thought, surely the mayor won't grant them this. He won't come out there. He's got work to do. He's a busy man, big city.
Is, absolutely.
And the mayor showed up. I thought that was a step too far, Jeff.
Oh my goodness, no. The mayor, I think, has handled this so incredibly well that I sent him a text telling him so. From day one, being able to engage, being able to make sure that people were respectful, and going out there and talking to you take a huge risk going out there talking to these people. You should see some of the social media posts about this mayor when he tried to clamp down and not let people get on the freeway the first night of the protest. It was unbelievable. I was driving through there and have never seen so many police cars up there at the William Street exit and blocking both exits both ways, both the entrance and the exit from William Street. That's all because of the mayor's efforts. He was not going to allow that to happen. On the other hand, he was going to make sure that we engage, that we talk to him, we listen to him. This is the home of Martin Luther King. It's the home of civil disobedience. These people have a legitimate reason to protest because of what's been going on in spite of Dallas. Dallas was one individual And I don't think that an entire race of people ought to be condemned because of the act of one individual.
And I'm not
but
doing
these
so.
police cops have been doing it. These
enough.
cops have been.
That's enough.
This
I
has been
mean,
going on and on and on, and they have a right. They have a right to protest.
Sure they do.
Especially in Atlanta.
We're not questioning that. However, they also have the right to get arrested. And you're saying civil disobedience, so they should have criminal records. It's a badge of honor to have a criminal record in the civil rights movement, right, Jeff?
And in
Yes.
Buckhead, because they were blocking streets and they were and they were creating a public safety hazard, as you mentioned, many of them were arrested.
Finally, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And
Now,
that's a deterrent.
Let me change the subject.
But let's just get back to the mayor. I think that the mayor did a great balancing act, as I thought the president,
I think he did a
of the United
decent job.
States did in his
Yeah.
speech.
I think he did a decent job. But I
in
want to change the
Dallas.
subject to somebody who I thought did a great job and truly spoke truth to power, as you say, and that's Andy Young. I think the criticism of Andy Young is ridiculous. Andy Young said a lot of things that needed to be said, namely that he doesn't want to see a bunch of young people killed on the downtown connector. Now, he
Right.
did use the term smart aleck,
Well, you
which was a
called spoiled brats.
Spoiled brats and
Unlovable.
smart Alex.
Unlovable.
He said that they were unlovable brats, but like we do in the media, you know, everything's taken out of context. And the next thing out of his
Exactly.
mouth was, but you got to love them. So he's
Right.
talking to the cops, who many of whom might consider these protesters or any
see, that
protesters
was a-
unlovable
but
brats.
see, that was a good
says,
thing,
you
Jeff.
got to love them. And so I think that he was
It
trying
was.
to speak to the police in their own language. And my thing is that I'm sorry he apologized. I'm
Well,
not going to apologize for
I am
Andy.
too.
Thank you.
And
That's
I
where I
think
was
he
going.
said the right sentence.
And
He
not
did
only
say the
that,
right
but
sentence.
we've heard all kinds of outlandish things from Andy, and
All the
and
time.
we've taken them in stride.
But it
Whether
wasn't-
it was smart-ass white
but it
boys
wasn't
in the Mondale
outlandish.
campaign.
Hey,
did you wear the
I had my button.
SAWB button?
I had my button. I
Yeah.
wore it with pride.
And he called the Margaret Mitchell house a hunk of
The
junk.
junk. That's right.
And we love him anyway.
But
He was right about this,
What?
and I thought
And
the
he-
state NAACP overreacted by insulting him the way that they did. And,
Told him to go into
and said he should go into
retirement?
Right.
retirement.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit much. That
Well,
was
a bit much. It was an insult.
This
to
is
Andy
rare
Young.
agreement. Rare agreement here that all
Bit
four of
much.
us agree that Andy Young should not have apologized, that his remarks in context made sense.
And he did say some. He didn't say all. He
Right.
said some.
And again, I mean, we really need to come to the center. Everybody needs to gravitate toward the center. I think that that's what Andy was doing with
And-
the police officers. I think that's what President Obama was doing on Wednesday night in Dallas. We need to all come together.
You can't
If we
condone the breaking of traffic and public safety laws, period. And that's where I think
It depends on what
Well,
those. It depends
yes,
on
it
what
is.
those laws are and what and the objective you're
And the
trying to
intent.
accomplish.
Yeah.
I think that that's what 1963 taught us.
So you're in favor of
Phil?
swarming the streets, and if an ambulance can't get through, too
1963
bad.
taught us to block the downtown
Wait a
connector.
minute.
No, it didn't teach
Yeah.
us to block the downtown
on.
connector. It taught us about civil disobedience and how sometimes you have to break the law in order to get people's attention.
Well, then let them be arrested and
Well,
clear the
and-
streets so
and-
ambulances and emergency vehicles
Well,
can
I
get
think
through.
that was the
You don't
intent.
want to address
was
that.
The intent was to get attention to the issue, and they got that, and they're getting that, and they've gotten a meeting with the mayor that's supposed to take place this week, and to discuss things. And that's one of the things that's interesting now compared to the civil rights movement. Andy's position was to talk to the officials of the cities that
Right.
they
What
he
were
did.
demonstrating in.
That's right. That's
what he
and
did,
to help
yeah.
get people out of jail once they got arrested.
It's
and so
also-
that was what he was continuing to
Hosea
do.
Williams
except
raised the
that-
temperature. Andy Young cooled the saucer
That's
down.
right.
That's right.
And you know, one of the problems, and you know, if there are some legitimate black grievances, and I think there are some, the danger is to be hijacked by a lot of these hardcore leftists who are, some of these are white Marxists. I saw a sign on West Paces, you know, Democratic Socialist, you know, so
For Bernie Sanders, yeah.
And some of these demands that were given to Kasim Reed have nothing to do with
gotta
Black
get out.
Lives Matter.
We gotta
They're
get
a
out.
left-wing laundry list.
We've got to get out. We'll come back to the civil rights movement in a sense when we return, and we'll discuss the court ruling in the case of the feud among the children of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And by the way, this topic has kicked up a lot of dust on our Georgia Gang Facebook page. We hope you check that out. And remember, we're on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. And speaking of that, I missed the broadcast. Thank you for filling in. I appreciated that. Let me wrap up a couple of loose ends on the, shall we say, the protest and race front. Sam Olens went to the White House, met with President Obama, the Attorney General of Georgia, with others,
Yes.
to talk about new ways to police And I have not talked to Attorney General Owens. Have you? I'd love to know what that was all about.
No, and there's obviously a big debate on how to community police, and of course I think we're all in favor of keeping the lines of communication open between the police and the community. That's all a good thing. I think everyone of all stripes believe in that, but I think it's enforcing the law, and you've had other cities that didn't go as well as Atlanta the last couple of weeks, and they did swarm interstates, and they say the vilest things, and they're openly threatening to kill the police, and that's where you need to have arrests.
A couple of other items worth mentioning here.
Can I also say that there was a report that Sam Olin said it was a very productive session, and it was not only about enforcing the law, but it was also community engagement between activists and
But
police.
I think we're going to get to that, because I think one of the topics we're going to be discussing in the weeks ahead is the president's desire and Hillary Clinton's desire to have national policing policies, and that gives me kind of a shiver, but that's
But
not
you
for
don't
now.
want federalized police.
No, that's not
No,
for
you
now. One other thing, we had the case of an Atlanta police officer who shot an alleged car vandal who was fleeing. The officer, James Burns, shot into his car and killed him, and he got fired in the middle of all this. I hope he got due process and all that, but he was fired.
Well,
He violated police policy. Apparently, the policy is that you do not fire into a moving vehicle like that because you don't know who else is in
And
the
then
vehicle.
finally in the
And
middle,
that focuses on police training, which everybody
really does.
is in
Right.
favor
Absolutely.
of.
I also think
That's
that
right.
they said that his account did not jibe with the
Right.
dash camera and what actually happened, so he was released.
And then
he's
in the
still
middle-
under investigation. He may be prosecuted, which probably he should be.
in the middle of all these marches, we had another curious thing. A young black man found hanged in Piedmont Park, and I looked at
Very
that and I
sad.
said, oh no, oh no. Well,
Yeah.
fortunately, Kasim Reed once again handed that right to the FBI, so there would be no suspicions,
And that was a good move.
and they ruled it was suicide.
They did, and it shows again, as we know, the power of social media. Some of these hysterical, emotional people jump to conclusions and put pressure on the mayor and the police, and finally, after about 24 hours, we had to calm it
Tamp it
down.
down.
Now let's go to what we have on our agenda today, and I need you here, Alexis. The Judge McBurney ruled in the case among the King siblings that Dr. King's Bible belongs to the estate, not to the Reverend Bernice King. And the Nobel Prize, where does that stand? I kind of
Well,
lost that.
he didn't rule on that. I think he said that needs to be determined.
Okay.
But
And they are going to trial,
They are
right?
going. There's a trial set for next month in August. But the tricky part is that while it belongs to the estate, and as the judge ruled, everything he had went to Coretta Scott King when he died, and Bernice is the executor of her estate. So that's where it gets a little, fuzzy as to who's actually in charge of what and who owns what. So I think that hopefully they'll be able to resolve it. It's really sad that.
It just seems to me that things belong to the estate. I can't put myself in their shoes, but all right, moving on. Speaking of great civil rights leaders, the DeKalb School Board voted Monday night to name a new school in Brookhaven after John Lewis. And the poor one white board member who dared to object to it on policy grounds was labeled a racist by almost all of his colleagues. I saw the quotes, they were pretty tough. And all this guy was saying was, Stan Jester was saying, hey, policies dictate this. You got to be dead 5 years.
Yeah,
You
that
have to
wasn't
take into
exactly
effect
all
the
he was
history of the
saying.
area.
That wasn't exactly all he was saying, because they have bent those rules before. They have named schools. But what his question was, do you think that anybody in that neighborhood would name that school for him? That was not a good question. I mean, the whole.
No, he didn't ask that. That's
Yes,
what
he
one of the
did.
board members
No.
did.
He asked. That was his question.
Well, I'm in the neighborhood, and I'd sure want to discuss it.
I do think,
Yes.
though, the overall issue, and it's been discussed by the legislature, a lot of folks have problems with naming things after people who are alive. I'm tired of seeing signs of these politicians. I don't care if they're Republican
friend
or
Matt Towery
Democrat.
thinking
Well, I
of
don't
that.
care if they're a Democrat or
No, but Matt
Republican.
Towery has
I
one.
understand, but the
Right.
point being is that the legislature set some rules here, and to your point, I think it's a mistake. Wait till people die and then memorialize them.
I know, but we've never done that in Georgia for all the time that I can remember. And we've written editorials
Yeah, I
about
don't
that.
know
I've written
John
editorials,
Lewis.
but we
right.
ought to.
Yeah.
But we ought to.
Yeah, but in the case of John Lewis, who is a living saint and is up in age, I think it's a tremendous honor. My understanding is somebody did some research at the school system and found that there was not a school in the nation named after John Lewis, and so
'Cause he's alive.
I think it's wonderful
alive.
that,
But when
You
that there will be
when
a
you
school
start
named after him
suspending
in
the
DeKalb
rules,
County.
then even though that's a legitimate
It is
suspension
a
of the
common
rules,
practice.
you
It's
open
a
you
common
open a Pandora's box.
It's a common practice.
And by the way, there was no objection to naming.
I don't like it.
There was no objection to naming another school in DeKalb after President Obama.
Right.
No objections whatever to that.
Well,
Right.
as far as I know, he's still living.
Well, I know.
Right,
But
but
that's
they-
more common with presidents. You know what? I'm going to regroup here. We got to get. There's some issues I really do want to get to. We haven't even talked about Mike Pence. We haven't talked about Tim Lee in Cobb County. We're going to have to scramble. Watch this organizational sleight of hand coming up. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
This has not been widely reported, but DeKalb County's efforts to put on the ballot a 1 cent sales tax for transportation, which it dearly needs, is we've reported that it's locked up in a 3-3 tie on the commission. But a new wrinkle this week, which we'll have in the crier this week, the law is written such that if this goes on the ballot and passes, the DeKalb County property tax freeze, which is 10 years old, will go away. And that's a problem. I think in a way that probably kills the SPLOST issue getting on the ballot for November. And we'll see where that goes. In Cobb County, Tim Lee valiantly trying to come back from his deficit against Mike Boyce and accusing him of being a taxer, a tax hiker.
Well, I think the whole thing is desperation on the part of Tim Lee. He's in serious trouble. He almost lost in May, and Boyce is coming on strong. And of course, Tim Lee is under severe pressure now. He and the commission have to back off of this stupid ordinance that they had passed a few months ago that was denying the right of people to be able to charge for parking. And so he's had to eat crow on that. And I think Boyce will win.
And I'm going to rephrase my argument on
That's
that and our arguments on that. Sometimes my neighborhood gets terribly congested because of swim meets. I think I have the right to charge people to park if they're coming to the swim meet, right?
Absolutely,
right.
in your driveway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's
How much would you
the
charge?
Cobb County analogy. Well, I think I'd look at the car they were driving and set
Yeah,
the
make it
scale
less than
accordingly. Set the scale accordingly.
The market sets the price. Yeah.
20
Lexus,
bucks.
Mercedes, for
$100.
you, $100. All right,
funny.
and I think we ought to talk about what the political races are doing. Oh, wait a minute, no, we're not. See, I told you I got to move this around. In Brookhaven, why are we back in Brookhaven? Megan Hansen, who has participated on this broadcast, did some detective work. She's running for the state house, and she's in a Republican runoff with Alan Cole. And all of us in Brookhaven got a flyer sent out by what was described as super friends of Megan Hansen. And it attacked Alan Cole, her opponent, Bates Madison, a sitting Brookhaven city councilman, and the former mayor of Brookhaven, who's no longer in office. It was an ugly, nasty attack flyer. And nobody could figure out where it came from. And I suspected Democrats, but I don't know why.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Megan Hansen
Megan
denied
dug
that
into
she
it.
sent it, yeah.
And she dug into it.
Well, she did, and I appreciate you breaking the story. And
Yep.
Insider Advantage broke it even before the AJC. But what's bothersome here, after her investigative work, it was the grandson of Jimmy Carter, James Carter, and his wife.
James Earl Carter
They
IV.
passed. They passed over some cash to the printing company, and this is fraud. This is misrepresentation. You know, it's legal in Georgia to do an anonymous flyer saying things, but it is fraud to just put Megan Hansen's name. So I make her the winner for exposing this. Everybody ought to be condemning. Even the Democrat incumbent had to crawfish in that district and say, "Oh, I don't agree with this."
Well, it was interesting too because James Earl Carter IV, I love that name, his wife, Allison Carter, who goes by Sally, Meghan found out that Sally Carter had gone to the printing house and paid in cash. So, one other question, you raised a couple. One more. Where did the cash come from for the Democrats to meddle in this Republican runoff?
Well,
I don't think it'll be disclosed.
I don't either, and it's very unethical. And you haven't heard the last of this.
Well, it's interesting too. He's also the person that had the video that of Mitt Romney.
The
talking about
47%.
47%.
Right. He's a known unethical activist who just that's his profession.
Well, he's found his niche. I mean, the Carters, as you watch that gene pool deteriorate,
Oh,
you go
stop.
from the former president
Come on.
down to a guy who's a dirty trickster for Democratic candidates, right?
Well, I don't know that we would
well, you
characterize
would condemn this. You would condemn this
That-
as unethical.
Well, it certainly is a pretty dirty trick, but I'm not sure I would condemn it
Well, it's
because
illegal.
that's the way people practice politics in this country.
I thought
Well,
you were
no, it's
against
not right,
illegality here. It's not
It's
right.
not right.
To use
No, it's
someone's
not right.
name like that,
It's
and
not right, but that's what people do. That's
well,
what
it's
they-
wrong.
That's what politicians
Well, you
do.
don't just accept it.
In the meantime, there's gridlock in Washington. I just want to point this out. I've had it on the notes for a couple of weeks. We haven't really gotten to it. I think Johnny Isakson, David Perdue, and our other representatives have a right to be angry when they pass a bill to provide $1 billion in funding to fight Zika, the Zika virus, and Democrats block it on political grounds.
Not political
and now have
grounds.
blocked the defense appropriations bill on political grounds. And if we saw what happened in Nice, France Thursday night, we know we've got to have a stronger defense.
Well, the problem is they wanted to gut everything else in order to do that. They wanted to take out the funding for Planned Parenthood. They wanted to take the funds from Obamacare to
Yeah, they're
use.
playing games.
But then when they wanted to,
but then when they
wanted a
They're just playing
standalone, they
games
didn't want to
with
do a standalone. So I
they're
think
just
Dick
playing
essentially
games.
is correct.
All right, let's get out early, save ourselves a little time for winners and losers. And note that Mike Pence appears to be Donald Trump's running mate, but it was postponed because of the incident in France. And I think the Sunday shows coming up after we're on the air will be covering Nice and Pence and Trump and Hillary Clinton and all the rest of it. So when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I'm going to begin this week with you, Philip.
Well, I think we all agree a winner was former Atlanta Mayor and UN Ambassador Andrew Young for speaking out, and I agree. I think we all agree he should not have apologized for
He
speaking
didn't
the truth.
really, though. I don't think
Well,
he really
it was an
apologized.
apology. I've got a couple other winners, and that is Cobb County DA Vic Reynolds and an assistant DA there, Mike Carlson. They were honored this past week by the, get a load of this title, the Georgia Gang Investigators Association. And there was over 1,000 people at their annual convention in Augusta. And Vic Reynolds has become the Paul Revere, going around the state warning of a criminal street gang crisis. And he's hoping that more law enforcement and prosecutors get together because it's tied into something we've talked about, and that is rising crime. And Megan Hansen, the investigative reporter, is my winner, too.
That's great. All right. Alexis,
Okay, I'm going to recognize Chief David Brown a little far afield.
you're stealing my stuff.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
but he was just so amazing to me. And he has such a fascinating moving backstory to the police chief of the Dallas Police Force. And so he's a real winner.
That guy was born for that job.
He was born for that job and for that moment and for
Yes.
this time. Absolutely. Also, True Colors has a new show opening this weekend and a new play called Real People, a new Lydia Diamond play. And then a point of personal privilege, I want to thank the EMTs, David and Michael, and Dr. Reynolds and Melanie in the emergency room at Grady Hospital for attending to me. I was in a car accident this week and got a little banged and bruised, but I'm all right, and they were wonderful.
And we'll say for the three of us who did not know about this accident until we taped, we're glad you're well and none the worse for wear.
Yes, especially
Because the
after
car
seeing those
looks like,
photos.
we've seen the photos.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to make Mayor Kasim Reed my winner and the Chief of Police, George Turner, for their handling of the protests this week in town. John Lewis is a winner for being named the elementary school. And GOP Senator Tim Scott gave an impassioned speech to the
Saw
U.S.
that.
Senate. And
that was quite a...
it really was, and it was just one of those moments when we're trying to pull everybody
He's a
together.
Republican.
He is a
Right.
Republican.
And he said he
He's an
gets stopped all the
African-American
time by
Republican.
police.
He said he was stopped seven
7
times in the last year, and it just I think that people stop and listen when they hear
I
something
haven't been
like
stopped
that.
7 times in 30 years.
How about that?
I mean, I'm not not sure of the number, but
Yeah.
it's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
But Alexis, let me follow on to what you said about David Brown, the Dallas police chief. I thought the most amazing, simple thing he said, he was talking about how we're asking police to become social workers and pick up all the ills of society. And he said flat out, 70% of our young people are raised in homes with single mothers. And you're asking the police to solve that problem. Too few black leaders will come out in front on that issue. And I just was bowled over by it, and I thought he was terrific. We should also acknowledge the passing and the death of Hollis Harris, who was the president of Delta Airlines, a good guy, and a 74-story tower in Midtown.
How
No
about
big deal, but it means there won't be a symphony hall there.
Nope, not on that,
is
not on that
over.
lot.
See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.